Godzilla vs. Kong is now playing in theaters and streaming on HBO Max, which is how I watched it, and in this video I'd like to share my thoughts on the film. I will delve slightly into spoilers, but I would say overall that this video is fine to watch if you haven't seen it, although like I said, there will be some light spoilers ahead. Now, before this movie came out, I did have some major concerns. In this monster verse that they've set up, we've had one King Kong movie that took place in the 1990s, and then two Godzilla movies which take place in the modern day, which is when this movie takes place. So my major concern was, like, how were they going to explain what had happened to Kong in the past 20-something years? You know, like, how did he get from the 90s, you know, the situation he was in there, to what would be presented in this movie? And I will say that the situation that we find him in at the beginning of this movie, they do a fine job of explaining how he got there. Again, would have been cool to have seen in a movie some of the stuff they talk about how he got to that point. Overall, though, I thought they did a good job of handling the stuff that we might have missed, and I thought that not having a second King Kong movie did not really hurt this one. Which leads me to my first point, is about halfway through this movie, I realize that this is the Kong sequel. Like, this is a King Kong movie. The storyline largely follows King Kong. Godzilla only kind of shows up at certain points where it would make sense. They kind of attempt to have the Godzilla storyline in the form of Millie Bobby Brown's character and Julian Dennison's character join this conspiracy theorist as they try to unravel some mystery connected to Kong that, like, is happening at the same time as what we're watching. But this is really a King Kong movie, so it's not balanced in how they show the two characters. So if you're a huge Godzilla fan, I will just say there's not a whole lot of him in this movie. There is enough, but this is definitely a King Kong movie. With that out of the way, I do want to talk about my negatives of the movie. I always like to talk about things I didn't necessarily like first, and there are quite a few tiny negatives to talk about, nothing too major. The first one I kind of already talked about. There is quite a bit of exposition regarding, you know, what happened when the last time we saw Kong up until now. You know, there's this child that he communicates with. And they tell the story of, like, what happened with her and how she got there. Again, I thought that would have been really cool to have seen in a movie, and then when we get to this point, we know what that relationship is like, and it kind of is a little bit more meaningful for the audience. There were also a couple of, and this might have just been me, some shots where it's only human characters talking, and the human characters are super in focus, but everything in the background is super out of focus, like it's super blurry, and it almost felt like during those scenes, it felt like I was watching, like, how a lot of movies might have a dream sequence where the characters almost look like they're floating. So I don't know if that was like a creative choice by the filmmakers, or if that's just, you know, maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine, but there are a lot of scenes where there was some questionable green screen, and I definitely felt like I was watching, like, a dream sequence. But that was really only when there were only human characters talking. Kyle Chandler, who is one of my favorite actors, who was in the Godzilla King of the Monsters, he's in this movie as well, and he is completely useless. He shows up in one scene at the beginning, and he's talking, and, you know, he's doing some Godzilla-related things, but, like, he does nothing, and then he shows up again in the middle of the movie, and they're like, hey, Godzilla's doing this, and he's like, okay, let's go follow him. But again, nothing happens. And then again, at the end of the movie, he's in another location, and nothing happens. He contributes nothing to the movie at all. Again, it's nice to see him in there. It's good for continuity for people who've watched the other movies in the you know, the franchise, but I felt like you could have had a version of this movie without him, and it would have been just as good. I mentioned earlier that there's a kind of side quest going on with Millie Bobby Brown's character and Julian Dennison's character. And at the end of the movie, and I'm going to try not to go into too much spoilers, but at the end of the movie, they're in the location where, like, the final throwdown is happening. And they're trying to contribute to what's going on as best they can. And their first, you know, proposed solution is stupid, you know, for like kids that are in high school. It's like, seriously, that's what you're going to try to do? And that doesn't end up working. And then the solution that they actually come up with that sort of kind of works is so, like, it's just one of those things where it's like, really, that is going to, like, turn the tide of what's about to happen. I was just like, oh, like, I wasn't a fan of what their contribution to the final fight was. It was laughable to me, to be honest. Now, the things I liked about this movie, there weren't as many. However, the thing that I liked the most is what I wanted out of the movie, and probably what most people will want out of the movie, which made me enjoy this movie overall, and that is the action. You know, we came to see Godzilla and King Kong fight, and they do in this movie multiple times, and it's awesome each time. It's beautiful to look at, the effects are amazing. You just can't help but feel excited and really engaged every time that you see them fight, or you know that they're about to fight. Speaking of the fights, they do something in this movie twice that it's maybe something that only I notice sometimes, but it's something that I really enjoy. So for context, my all-time favorite fight scene in a movie is from Mission Impossible Fallout, when Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill are fighting that guy in the bathroom, and they're just, you know, throwing hands, throwing fists. But there's no music, there's no song playing, there's no, like, none of the score, there's no atmospheric music. You just hear the sounds of them fighting and the sounds of the glass crashing and stuff like that. There's a couple times in this movie where Kong and Godzilla and maybe one other Titan are fighting and there's no music, and you can just hear, like, you know, it's kind of hard to say what a lizard hitting a giant ape sounds like, but you know, they do their best. But you just hear the destruction. It just sounds so visceral to me, and I love it. And they do that a couple times in this movie. So that's one thing I really liked about a lot of the action scenes is there's no music. You just kind of absorb the sounds of the fight. Like, it sounds like you're actually watching a fight. I mentioned earlier as one of my negatives is I felt that there was some exposition that maybe could have been done in a previous film. With that being said, I did think Kong's relationship with the little girl was really well done. Like, it really felt like they had a connection. There were some emotional beats that they hit there that, you know, kind of resonated. Again, I would have preferred to have seen that in another movie, but for what we got in this one, I thought it was really well done. So as I'm wrapping up my thoughts, I do realize that I listed way more negatives than positive, but for me, I wanted to go into this movie. I knew what I wanted. I just wanted to see a bunch of giant monsters fighting, and we got that in spades in this movie, and they did it really well. So even though I might have had more negatives, those were kind of tiny details and maybe some nitpicks and pet peeves of mine, but what I wanted out of the film, they gave me. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. Alright, so Godzilla vs. Kong, have you seen it? If so, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for more.